Have you ever looked into the mirror and felt like someone was missing behind your own eyes? It's as if there's a quiet vacancy inside, a space untouched by applause, untouched by love, untouched even by success. Perhaps you know that space. Maybe you've called it loneliness, or maybe it's never had a name, just a weight. Many people try to outrun this inner emptiness. We chase after achievements, relationships, new routines. We decorate the outside, hoping it might repair something inside. But the truth is unsettling. No amount of doing can fill a space that is aching for being. This is often the first whisper from the soul, the moment when nothing external can soothe what feels lost internally. And rather than a problem to fix, it's a signal, one that says you've wandered too far from home. This inner void isn't a failure, it's an invitation. You see, the ego is good at building lives that look complete from the outside. Careers, identities, roles. But the self, what Jung called the totality of who we are, doesn't care for appearances. It cares for wholeness. And wholeness demands honesty. The first inner shift begins when you stop asking, "What's wrong with my life?" and start asking, "Where did I lose myself along the way?" Maybe it was the moment you swallowed your truth to be accepted, or when you ignored your fatigue to keep being useful. Maybe it was when you said yes, when everything inside screamed no. This emptiness, it's not punishment. It's the echo of your deeper self asking to be remembered. And often this remembering begins with slowing down, with no longer pretending that fine is enough, with sitting in that hollow silence, not to escape it, but to listen to it. Imagine a desert, dry, wide, and cracked. The sun beats down, and nothing grows. That's how the soul can feel after years of self-abandonment. But just beneath that cracked soil, seeds lie dormant, waiting, not for more sunshine, but for water, for depth, for you. And when you begin to return to yourself, even in the smallest way, by telling your truth, honoring your tiredness, allowing your emotions to breathe, that barren soil begins to shift. The seeds begin to stir. So if you feel empty, lost, or like something essential has gone missing, don't panic. Don't run. Don't numb it. Sit with it. Because this may be the beginning of your return. There comes a moment, quiet, almost invisible, when the silence around you starts to carry a different weight. It's no longer just the absence of noise. It becomes a presence, a whisper, a pull from somewhere deep within. Maybe it happens in the early morning when the world is still asleep, and for the first time in years, you notice the sound of your own breath. Maybe it comes after a loss, when the distractions fall away, and all that's left is you, and the echo of everything you never said. This silence isn't empty, it's sacred, and in it your soul begins to speak. But not in the language of words. It speaks through feelings, through subtle aches, tears you didn't expect, or a strange peace that shows up in the middle of your chaos. Carl Jung once said, "Solitude is for me a fount of healing which makes my life worth living. Not isolation, not avoidance, but a solitude that heals, because in that silence, you meet what the noise kept you from." Most of us have spent our lives avoiding silence. We fill every space with music, with voices, with scrolling, with thinking, because silence can be confronting. It brings us face to face with what we've buried, old grief, forgotten dreams, the self we abandoned to belong. But here's the truth. Silence is not your enemy. It is the doorway back to your soul. Have you ever stood at the edge of a forest? Just stood still and listened. At first it seems like nothing's there. But the longer you stay, the more you begin to hear the rustle of leaves, the call of birds, the creak of ancient trees. Life reveals itself only to those who wait. Your soul works the same way. At first, you may feel nothing in the silence, just emptiness. But if you stay, if you breathe, if you listen, something will arise. Maybe an insight, maybe a memory, maybe a quiet knowing that you don't need to keep pretending. This is the second inner shift, when the silence no longer feels like a void, but a voice. And in that voice, something long forgotten begins to return. your intuition, your truth, your rhythm. You begin to notice what drains you. You begin to crave slowness. You begin to realize that being alone isn't loneliness, it's presence. And as the silence deepens, so does your connection to something greater than yourself, the self, the soul, the part of you that has always been whole. So when the noise fades and the silence comes, don't rush to fill it. Let it speak, let it soften you, let it guide you back. Because in that stillness, you're not losing yourself. You're finally hearing what's been waiting to be heard all along. What if the parts of yourself you've spent a lifetime hiding are not your enemies but your keys? There comes a moment in every journey back to the self when the light gets dimmer, not because you've lost your way, but because you're being called inward, into the places you've long avoided. This is where the shadow lives. Carl Jung defined the shadow as the unconscious aspects of the personality which the conscious ego does not identify in itself. In simpler terms, it's everything you were taught not to be, everything you learned to reject in order to be loved, accepted, or safe. Anger, neediness, jealousy, fear, sensitivity, power, desire, grief. We were told to push these parts away, so we did. We buried them, we denied them, and in their place we wore masks. We became who we thought we should be, and lost who we truly are. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It waits, and eventually, something cracks. A relationship ends. A health issue arises, anxiety won't go away, and suddenly all the parts we locked away begin to leak through. This is the third inner shift, the moment you stop running from your darkness and begin to sit with it. It's terrifying at first. You might feel like you're unraveling. But what's really happening is that the false self is breaking down, so the real you can emerge. Imagine you've been carrying a suitcase your whole life, heavy, worn. Inside are all the emotions you were never allowed to feel. And one day you sit down, open it up, and finally look. There may be tears, rage, shame, but also relief. Because now you're no longer pretending, you're no longer fragmenting yourself to survive. The truth is, your shadow holds not only your pain, but your power, your creativity, your boundaries, your instincts, your voice. When you begin to reclaim what you once rejected, you don't become someone worse. You become whole. The work of individuation, the journey to become your true self, requires this meeting with the shadow, not to destroy it, but to listen to it, to ask, what did you come to teach me? What truth have I silenced? What part of me have I been too afraid to love? And slowly, gently, something inside begins to heal. Not because you've fixed yourself, but because you've stopped abandoning yourself. So if you're feeling triggered, overwhelmed, or like everything is surfacing at once, don't despair. You are not falling apart. You are waking up. You're beginning to meet the parts of you that have waited in the dark for years, just to be seen, just to be held, just to be welcomed back home. There's a moment when the smile you wear starts to feel heavy, when the laughter doesn't reach your eyes anymore, when the roles you've played so well for so long start to crumble in your hands. This is the moment when the persona begins to fall. The persona, as Carl Jung described it, is the mask we wear to face the world. It's not inherently bad. It helps us navigate society, connect with others, function in daily life. But the danger arises when we forget it's a mask, when we confuse the performance for the person. And over time, that mask becomes a prison. You become the caretaker who never asks for care, the strong one who's never allowed to cry, the successful one who secretly feels empty, the agreeable one who's screaming no on the inside. And one day it cracks. Maybe it's subtle, a tear in a quiet moment, a sense of deep exhaustion. Or maybe it's loud, a breakdown, a conflict, a decision that can't be undone. But in that cracking, truth begins to seep through. This is the fourth inner shift, when the false self starts to collapse, and you're left face to face with who you really are beneath it all. At first, this can feel terrifying, because without the mask, who are you? You may feel exposed, raw, vulnerable. You may fear rejection, abandonment, judgment. But what if this is the beginning of your liberation? Imagine a bird who has spent its life in a golden cage, well-fed, praised, admired. But one day the door swings open. At first it stays. The cage is all it's ever known. But something stirs deep within, something ancient and wild. And one day, trembling, it flies. That is what it means to let go of the persona. You begin to live from your truth, not your performance. You say what you mean. You set boundaries that reflect your value. You allow yourself to be seen, fully, imperfectly, authentically. This isn't easy. There may be grief. You may lose people who only knew the mask. But what you gain is yourself. And there is no applause louder than the quiet peace of being real. So if your roles are falling apart, if you can no longer pretend, if everything in you is begging to stop performing, don't resist. This is not your failure, it's your return. The persona is falling, yes, but beneath it, your true face waits. Not perfect, but real. Not polished, but powerful. And in that realness, your soul breathes again. Before you understand it, before you speak it, before you even admit it to yourself, your body already knows. The body is ancient. It holds what the mind forgets. It remembers every moment you silenced your truth, every time you stayed when you wanted to run, every time you smiled when your heart was breaking. Long before the conscious mind catches up, the body has already begun to whisper, through tension, through fatigue, through migraines, gut issues, insomnia. These are not just symptoms, they are stories, unspoken, unprocessed, unresolved. And they often surface in the quiet, during that strange in-between space when you begin to come back to yourself. This is the fifth inner shift. When you realize your healing is not just mental or emotional, it is embodied. Carl Jung said, "The body is the shadow of the soul." What he meant is that your physical being is not separate from your inner world. In fact, it is the first to carry the truth. Think about it. How many times have you felt sick in situations where you had to betray yourself? How often have you just known something was wrong, without evidence, just a feeling in your gut? The body is your compass, but we've been taught to override it, to push through, to numb. We caffeinate it, medicate it, distract it, and in doing so, we silence its wisdom. But something shifts when you begin to listen again. You notice the tightness in your chest isn't just physical, it's emotional. You feel that your shoulders aren't just stiff, they're burdened. You start to ask not, how do I get rid of this pain, but what is this pain trying to tell me? And suddenly, healing becomes less about fixing and more about befriending. You begin to treat your body not as a machine to manage, but as a living archive of your truth. You stretch, you rest, you cry, you breathe, you move with tenderness, you speak with care. And in that gentleness, something remarkable happens. The body begins to soften. The knots begin to loosen. Not because you forced anything, but because you finally stopped fighting yourself. The journey home to the self is not just a psychological one, it's cellular. So if your body is aching, listen. If you feel tension, pause. If you wake up tired even after rest, don't just ask what's wrong. Ask what's been unspoken, because your body doesn't lie. And when you begin to return to yourself, it will be the first to feel the shift. Not just in less pain, but in more presence. Not just in fewer symptoms, but in deeper safety. Not just in functioning, but in freedom. Transformation rarely announces itself with fanfare. It doesn't always come in lightning bolts or life-shattering revelations. Sometimes it begins in the quietest choices, like saying no when you used to say yes, like pausing before you answer, instead of people-pleasing by reflex, like going for a walk instead of scrolling through the ache. These small choices are sacred. They mark the sixth inner shift, when your daily actions start to reflect your inner truth. At first, they seem insignificant, choosing rest instead of pushing, speaking a boundary that trembles on your lips, telling someone you're not okay. But over time, they form a new pattern, a new path, one that isn't shaped by fear or survival, but by alignment. Carl Jung wrote, "We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. Acceptance begins in the details. When you stop waiting for a perfect moment to be who you are and start being that person in the small imperfect now, that's where the shift happens. You may not notice it at first. It might not feel like a breakthrough, but these micro-movements accumulate, like drops of water smoothing stone. Suddenly, you're not available for what drains you. You no longer betray your gut for approval. You begin to protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. And others begin to feel it too. Your energy changes. You become less reactive, more rooted, not because life got easier, but because you got clearer. Because you're no longer living out of habit, you're living out of choice. And yes, there will be discomfort. Sometimes healing feels like loss, like letting go of identities, roles, or relationships that no longer fit the new frequency of your soul. But you realize that peace costs less than pretending, that solitude is softer than self-abandonment, that honesty feels lighter than performance. This is how transformation quietly builds. You choose the truth again and again. You return to yourself, breath by breath, and one day you look back and realize you're no longer surviving your life, you're living it, fully, softly, bravely. Not by changing everything all at once, but by changing one thing that matters, again and again and again. There comes a moment, soft, still, unmistakable, when you realize you're no longer searching. Not because you've found all the answers, but because you've found your way back to you. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It often happens in a moment of stillness. A breath, a glance in the mirror, a walk under grey skies, and something inside whispers, "I'm here. I never left. I was just waiting for you to return." This is the seventh and final shift. Not a doing, but a being. Not a breakthrough, but a homecoming. You are no longer trying to become someone. You are unlearning who you're not. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And that privilege, Mashan, is sacred. You stop performing. You stop apologizing for your depth, your needs, your intuition, your pace. You begin to wear your truth like a soft garment, not armor, not a costume, but something that fits your skin. You no longer chase people who don't see you. You no longer betray yourself to keep peace. Instead, you start walking with yourself, hand in hand, with gentleness, with honesty, with grace. It doesn't mean life becomes perfect. The waves still come, the pain still visits. But now you meet it differently. You meet it with presence. You meet it with breath. You meet it as someone who is no longer a stranger to their own soul. This is not the end. It's the beginning of a deeper life, a slower life, a braver life, where you are allowed to be soft, where joy doesn't need permission, where your voice, your truth, your boundaries are no longer hidden in the shadows. You have come home, not to a place, but to the truth of who you are when nothing needs to be proven. So let the masks fall, let the silence deepen, let the small choices anchor you. And remember, you don't have to become someone else to be loved. You just have to come back to who you already are. So now I ask you, have you been moving through life wearing a face that no longer feels like yours? Have you silenced your body, your truth, your needs, just to be accepted? Have you mistaken survival for living? And most of all, can you feel it now? That gentle pull inward, the invitation to return, not to the person others wanted you to be, but to the one you were, before the world told you who you had to become. Coming back to yourself isn't a dramatic act. It's a sacred one. It happens in quiet choices, in brave silences, in soft truths spoken for the first time. And if this video held a mirror to your soul, if something in you softened, awakened, or stirred, I ask you gently, support this channel through a super thanks. It helps us keep creating videos like this for souls like yours. If you haven't yet, subscribe now. Let this be your space of return. And don't leave without watching the next video appearing on your screen, because this journey has just begun.